Call the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Washington County Board of Supervisors. Prior to this meeting, public notice was given by posting a copy of the agenda in the office of the county clerk and emailing the agenda to the West Bend Daily News, which is the official newspaper. In addition, the agenda was emailed to CNI newspapers, Express News, the Kewaskum Statesman, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, WIBD, WMBZ Radio, and WTKM Radio. The above action is in conformity with the state of Wisconsin's open meeting law. We'll begin with a moment of silent prayer and then the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have a quorum. Supervisor Gallitz is ill, will not be in tonight. He's excused. Supervisor Smisek is running a little bit late. He'll be a little bit late to the meeting. We can begin with the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Supervisor Bertram, Supervisor Mary second. Supervisor McCune. Hold on a second
The
here.
diamond.
What, diamond?
Did I got you? Are you on? There you are. Okay.
Got something to read in.
There are no names up here, so I'm kind of like
Sorry.
doing blind today. A little technical issue.
Okay, no problem. If I'd like to read something in for everybody. Yesterday, March 10th, 2020, the Southeast Wisconsin Professional Baseball Park District Board voted unanimously 13-0 to approve a resolution to certify the end of the Miller Park District sales tax. Everybody be happy about this. The certification to end Miller Park sales tax will now be turned over to the Wisconsin Department of Revenue for final implementation. 25 years ago, long time, the Wisconsin legislature created Act 56, establishing the roadmap for planning, design, construction, and operation of the public-private venture that became known as Miller Park. The enabling legislation established a 0.1% sales tax in 5 southeastern Wisconsin counties. Those counties included Milwaukee, Ozaukee, Racine, Washington, and Waukesha. While stripped, our county voted 30-0 to not be part of it, as did, I believe, Ozaukee and definitely Racine. We had 30 supervisors back then. The district sales tax funded the public sector's share of the Miller Park facility. At this stage, what we have, and this is someone I wanted to just mention, at this stage, now that the tax will be turned off, the goal now is to preserve the stadium, keep it at the level that it's just been running at a tremendous high level as far as efficiency and the quality, as far as not falling apart. County Stadium, in its later years, quite frankly, was really having issues. There was no money to maintain it, no one was putting money back into it. It wasn't quite like Wrigley Field where things were falling, cement falling apart, but it was pretty rough shape for any of you that went to it at the end. The goal now is we've set enough money aside to handle the improvements going forward through the lease of 2030, and they have a potential extension for 10 more years. There's enough money now that's set aside for that as well, to pay the insurance, to do all the routine maintenance on the roof, the seats, the ribbon board, the scoreboard. There's money set aside for all of those different categories. So the years that I've been on that board, that's one of the, I sit on that operations committee as well. That's one of the functions now, is just to maintain with what we have, because that's our investment. We have a percentage ownership in that, as do the other 4 other counties. So our goal now is to maintain what we have. We're not going to collect any more in, but just keep the club, the stadium in the condition it's in, and fulfill what we have for the lease. So thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Mahalik.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I was just going to ask Supervisor McCune to give us his last report on the baseball thing, which he has already done, so thank you very much. I'm sure, now it's 25 years ago, did you actually vote I don't know if I'm supposed to address it. I'm curious, I should address the sheriff. Did he actually vote 25 years ago? No.
Only 18, I've only been on 18.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, hearing no more, we'll just vote on this. All in favor of the consent agenda, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Personal appearances, letters, and other communications. First, I want to announce, before you do anything, that Friday's legislative breakfast is canceled. Please make sure you take it off of your calendar, don't show up. There will be no breakfast there for you. You'll be walking around in the hallway wondering why the door to 2024 is locked. Okay. Additionally, we did do a proclamation. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but March 1st through 7th is the 2020 Women in Construction Week that we proclaim for that all across Washington County. So I just want everybody to be aware of that. We'll begin with the accommodation of Communications Officer Samantha Summer, Deputy Joseph Connery, and Deputy Dustin Fletcher. Sheriff?
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. If I could have you guys stand in front of the podium over here.
Actually, Sheriff, would you mind reading all three of the accommodations in sequence? We'll make the presentation all at the same time.
Could I have?
Yeah, have everybody up. I want Washington finest,
All right.
Washington County's finest up here for everyone to see. Thanks, gentlemen.
So what we're presenting today is actually three different calls involving all of the officers that you see in front of me. So from your right to left, the first commendation involves Deputy Connery, Deputy Fletcher, and Communications Officer Samantha Summers. So whereas on February 12th, 2020 at 8:33 p.m., the Washington County Emergency Communications Center received a 911 call regarding a 62-year-old unconscious woman in the town of West Bend. The Communications Center relayed that the husband located his wife slumped over a chair. She was cool and clammy and was gasping for air. Prior to the deputy's arrival, Communications Officer Samantha Summer initiated emergency medical dispatching protocols for an individual experiencing a cardiac event. Emergency medical dispatching is recognized as an essential component of the effective EMS system provided by public safety answering points dispatch centers. This process allows the call taker to efficiently narrow down the caller's medical situation to assist first responding units and provide quality instruction to the caller before help arrives. The Washington County Sheriff's Communications Center implemented EMD, emergency medical dispatching, in November of 2016. Whereas Communications Officer Samantha Summer took the initial call and calmly and professionally worked with the husband to check responsiveness, position the patient on the floor, check pulse, breathing, and then correctly begin to administer chest compressions. She reassured the husband during this stressful encounter by advising how close the deputies were and kept the husband focused on the life-saving task at hand. Whereas Deputy Joseph Connery and Deputy Dustin Fletcher arrived on scene simultaneously within 6 minutes after being dispatched to the call. Deputy Dustin Fletcher took over chest compressions from the husband, while Deputy Joseph Connery deployed the automatic external defibrillator, those little shocky units. 1 minute after arriving on the scene, Deputy Joseph Connery administered a shock with the AED, and Deputy Dustin Fletcher then continued with compressions until West Bend rescue personnel arrived on the scene. Whereas the woman was subsequently transported to the local hospital where she was listed in stable but critical condition. Unfortunately, this does have kind of a sad follow. The patient did end up passing away several days after the fact, but the reality is that these three officers here gave her a fighting chance. So now, therefore, be resolved that Communications Officer Samantha Summer, Deputy Joseph Connery, and Deputy Justin Fletcher are hereby commended for their exceptional professionalism and dedication to the well-being of the citizens of Washington County. Thank you very much. That's the first one. So next to Communications Officer Summer is Deputy Cody Oslos. And this case was on Saturday, February 22nd at 2020 at 8:51 p.m. The Washington County Emergency Communications Center received a 911 call regarding a 73-year-old unconscious man in the village of Jackson. The caller advised the man was pulseless and not breathing, whereas Deputy Oslos was monitoring radio traffic and determined that he was the closest first responder to the home. He responded to the home without prompting, even though it was a village of Jackson, and arrived moments just before the municipal police officer. Whereas both officers made contact with the patient, and Jackson police officer began checking vital signs, while Deputy Oslos began to prep the automatic external defibrillator for deployment. Whereas both officers positioned the patient on the floor, and Deputy Oslos hooked up the AED. The AED confirmed the need for a shock, which Deputy Oslos administered. The Jackson police officer began administering CPR until Jackson Rescue arrived on scene. Whereas Jackson Rescue administered one additional shock. When they arrived, the patient regained a pulse, began to breathe on his own, and was subsequently transported to a local hospital. So now, therefore, be it resolved that Deputy Cody Oslos is hereby commended for his exceptional professionalism and dedication to the well-being of citizens of Washington County today. And our final one is Deputy Blake DeMunk, all the way to your left. This incident occurred on Friday, February 7th at 4:24 p.m. The Washington County Emergency Communications Center received a 911 call regarding a 15-month-old child having an active seizure. The Communications Center relayed that the child had an ear infection and was sent home from daycare on this date with a 102.9-degree fever. After playing normally at home for 2 hours, the child suddenly had a seizure. Whereas upon his arrival at 4:32 p.m., the deputy was met by a female indicated that she needed assistance with CPR. This female was later identified as a first responder with the local fire department and also a nurse at a local hospital. She began CPR prior to the deputy's arrival and became both physically and emotionally exhausted. The mom and one other child were also on the scene at the time, which only intensified the situation. Whereas the deputy ran into the residence with his AED and knelt down beside the child to quickly assess him. The child had blood coming from his nose, was not responsive, and did not have a pulse. The deputy promptly took over infant CPR at 4:34 p.m. while simultaneously giving instructions to the first responder on how to set up the AED. Whereas after administering CPR for about 90 seconds, but before the AED was hooked up, the deputy noticed resistance in the chest area of the child. The deputy stopped to reevaluate the child and noticed his chest was moving up and down, and he could feel a pulse. He also noticed that the child began to gurgle blood that was in his mouth and began moving. Hartford Rescue arrived and confirmed the child had a pulse and was immediately transported to EMC Hartford. Whereas I spoke with the first responder, whose primary occupation is a nurse, and she stated, this is a quote, "I was so thankful to see that officer that could help me. This infant's life was in our hands. He quickly and calmly came to the scene to relieve mom and took over CPR to give us a break. He did a wonderful job, and I appreciate his help." Whereas the child was subsequently released from the hospital and appears to be on his way to a full recovery. Now therefore be it resolved that Deputy Blake DeMunk is hereby commended for his exceptional professionalism and dedication to the well-being of the citizens of Washington County. So I just thought these three cases that you should know of. I'm very proud of our staff.
When I call these fine officers the best that Washington County has to offer, I'm being entirely truthful with that. I mean, these are our front line. These are the people that protect us, that come in and protect our children and save them. The things that you guys do, I commend you entirely for. We're just blessed to have you, and I want to thank each one individually. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Commendation of Ted Kugler, Highway Department. Scott Schmidt will present it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, County Board members. That'll be right up on his way. Whereas on February 18th, 2020, while monitoring road conditions during a winter storm, Ted Kugler, a Highway Department foreman, noticed damage to his safety structures along I-41, tire tracks in the snow, and no vehicles in the location of the damage. Whereas as Ted continued further down the roadway, he noticed the vehicle stop with the flashers on which triggered him to pull over and utilize his highly visible flashing lights to protect the vehicle. Whereas after approaching the vehicle, Ted found a passenger who had passed out and footprints leaving the driver's door. Whereas Ted's quick action to contact the Washington County Sheriff's Office allowed for a deputy to be dispatched who later administered Narcan, an opioid antagonist, to the unresponsive passenger, saving the passenger's life. Whereas the responding state patrolman located the driver who had left the scene on foot, was also impaired, but was subsequently arrested for processing by the judicial system. Whereas Ted's attention to detail and willingness to help others saved the lives of the vehicle's occupants and members of the community. Whereas Ted also shared his story with the television news media, bringing greater awareness to the dangers of impaired driving, promoting the importance of safety for highway department workers, and exemplifying the positive impact the highway department has on the public. Be it therefore resolved that Washington County commends Ted Kugler for exhibiting the values of our county. Thank you, Ted.
I think Ted exemplifies the kind of employees that we have in Washington County and how they're just not employees, they're members of the community. And they are there for everybody to help, takes that extra step, and it happens all the time. We really appreciate what you did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next order of business is consideration upon request reading of resolutions and ordinances. 2019 Resolution 59, commendation of Janie Krieg. Is Janie here? Okay.
Whereas Janie Krieg has contributed more than 41 years of loyal service to the citizens of Washington County, and whereas Janie Krieg has chosen to retire from her present position of Neil Site Manager at Aging and Disability Resource Center, now therefore be it resolved that the Washington County Board of Supervisors pause in its deliberations to pay tribute and to commend Janie Krieg for her 41 years of meritorious service. Be it further resolved that on behalf of all citizens of Washington County, this body does herewith extend to her heartfelt thanks for her many accomplishments and successes. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to Janie Krieg as a token of appreciation on the part of this board.
All right, 41 years. And I say this to everybody, how old were you when you started? So thank you so much for your service. Thank you very much. Do you want to say something? You can if you like.
It's been quite a ride.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Take care. 2019 Resolution 60, disallowance of claim, Mary Sherman. We need a motion on the commendation. Motion by Peter Sorcy, second by Kelling, Supervisor Kelling. 2019 Resolution 60, disallowance of claim, Mary Sherman. Need a motion? Supervisor Schleif, Supervisor Boulevard. Are there any questions regarding this? We need an explanation more than what's on there. Okay, we'll vote on this electronically.
You have to select present.
Meeting blank.
It's
Blank.
It says it, but it's not showing present on your screens.
Yeah, I don't have a present on mine either.
I think we're gonna need to take a break. John, we're gonna need to take a break because I'm gonna have to reset the system.
Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break or so. We need to reset the equipment. We're having more technical issues.
We have the primary at 6 o'clock. Got it.
Huh?
It's like phone Friday.
I think we have the problem fixed. Everybody can return to their seat, please.
Okay. Josh will probably go to.
Okay, sure. Okay, do we need any more explanation of disallowance of claim? If not, we'll vote yes will be to disallow the claim. We'll vote electronically.
Thank you, sir.
We all in?
Yep.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to 2019 Resolution 61, resolution setting Washington County elected official salaries. Moved by Supervisor Mahalik, second by Supervisor Smisek. Any questions? Any discussion? Supervisor Kelly.
Just before we vote on this, I just wanted to make one thing clear. I did second the motion to bring this to the board. It is not an endorsement of the item. I'm only presenting it here today for discussion, so I just wanted to make that clear. Okay?
Seeing no further discussion. Oh, we got more? Hold on. I'm sorry, Supervisor Connery.
Because there's not much up here, there's no flashing.
Sorry.
Okay, I've got a couple questions. I guess why are we spending the excess 4% in the first year? That puts us up actually within the top 3 pay rates. If we stayed at exactly where we're at this in 2021, you'd still be number 5. 2022, you'd still be number 4 or 5, it's so close. And the following year is the same. Why do we need to be way up at the top? The other thing is, major question I have on the resolution is, it says total annual salary. Is that total annual salary, or is that the money plus benefits?
Okay, I'll break down your questions. The total annual salary is just salary, it's not benefit, does not include benefits. So in addition to that would be retirement, Wisconsin retirement system, health insurance, and work comp.
ETF, too. Retirement, yeah, ETF, yeah.
That's funded by the county. life, a small payment for life insurance. So those are separate from this. Your initial question, why would we put them into the top three? It's the same procedure we use for all employees in the compensation plan that we just did. 75th percentile, if you remember hearing that, I said it many, many times. So that was why, the same approach. If we would simply have done a 2% increase annually across the board for 4 years, the difference is, if I recall, about $1,500, something maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more than that. So at the end, we decided, we recommended an administrative, and I think the agreement was 75th percentile is what we did for everybody else. If it's good enough for everybody else, it's good enough for these three positions.
And then it says Washington County elected officials. Is this all the elected officials, or is it just these few?
Just these three.
Should have said that.
Yeah.
That's why they're underlined in red.
Yeah, my understanding is that the rates need to be set prior to the election, right? So it's a statutory requirement to address those, correct?
Yes, statutorily, the county board has to set the salaries for these three positions before papers are drawn. Same thing happens every 4 years. 2 years ago, we set the county clerk of courts and the sheriff. So this would be the cycle for these other positions.
Supervisor Krebs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at resolution page 2, line 45, why does the clerk of courts in the year 23 not receive any salary?
In the year 23 will be a new new term for the clerk of courts. So we will have to set it again.
A future county board
Right.
will amend their, or set that rate.
Precisely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no more discussion, we'll vote on this electronically. It's not coming up on my screen. Motion passes. I have to count them out.
17 yes, 5 no, and 1 abstain.
It's not popping up on, I usually get
All
that.
yours.
Yeah, I usually get the numbers on mine. There it is. 17-5 with 1 abstention. Motion passes. So, 2019 Resolution 62 authorized Wisconsin Department of Transportation to request Federal Highway Administration to transfer Surface Transportation Program Milwaukee Urbanized Area funds to the Federal Transit Administration. Motion by Supervisor Sorcy, second by Supervisor Bishop. We need an explanation on this one? Any questions? Seeing none, we'll vote on this electronically. Motion passes 23-0. 2019 Resolution 63, 2021, 2026 Washington County Capital Improvement Program. The motion. Supervisor Schleif, Supervisor Kelly. Any discussion?
There is one change that I want to highlight that was not in your packet, and it has been updated by the finance department. Executive committee motioned and approved to remove the project in 2026 for the cold storage building, $900,000 expense. So that project has been removed from the plan. It is not although it is reflected in your packet, it is not reflected in what will be the final document.
Supervisor Martin.
Thank you. I just have a question relative to one item says WB Vehicle Facility. What does the WB stand for?
West Bend.
Yes.
Why would it be West Bend? That's my question.
Well, the plan was to build it in West Bend.
What?
The plan was to build it in West Bend.
It's for rooftop unit replacement. But why is it WB? My question is.
Can you tell me where you're at? So we're talking about two different things.
Where I'm at?
Which project?
Multiple pages. It was under the highway department.
Oh, it's the West Bend.
The West
Highway
Bend
Show.
facility.
Then it should be defined as such. It doesn't really look good to see a West Bend vehicle facility. The only area where I saw it listed. Then it should be Washington County.
There's a Slinger shop and a West Bend shop, so the West Bend shop is WB. We can put a legend and a key in next year.
I think it should be clarified so that it's Washington County Vehicle Facility at West Bend or hyphen West Bend. Doesn't look good otherwise.
Is that just a friendly amendment to,
I'm hoping that it'll be corrected in the capital improvement plan.
There's no amendment to the plan,
Okay.
to the resolution. The resolution is under consideration, but Margie and I can work on changing it.
My question is, will it be corrected?
Margie and I can work on correcting it, yes.
Thank you.
Supervisor Bishop?
Question on, in your summary, you changed some things in the overall improvement plan. And in there, you took out 1.6 million for the brownfield site, and yet we're going to be voting on pulling that out of the general fund. Why are we not taking it from the sales tax?
As you can see from thank you for asking that question. As you can see from the spreadsheet that has the totality of all projects from 2021 to 2026, all of the dollars are accounted for utilization from the sales tax. So as I've said before, the capital improvement plan has historically been really a how do we spend the sales tax plan, not a capital improvement plan. So included in that is $5 million that'll be specifically for property tax relief. So where the law says we have to reduce property taxes, the bottom of that page you'll see $5 million goes specifically to reduce property taxes. The rest of the money in 2021 specifically is laid out on all these different projects. So if we wanted to do the brownfield project now, either we would have had to take it from one of those projects in 2021, or we have to do a general fund transfer. So that's the reason we pulled it out. The sales tax is utilized, as you can see at the very bottom of the page, largely as number one, reducing property tax, and B, allowing for an alternative to borrowing. Because if we don't have the sales tax, then we're going to borrow, and the only way you can borrow is to raise property taxes. So rather than being a slush fund, this is used specifically to reduce property taxes. And then use the general fund to pay for things like brownfield projects, which come up from time to time.
Supervisor Mahalik?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two things. If you look at the 89 pages that are listed in the capital improvement program, if you look at Just for our vast viewing audience, if you look at page 3 under golf course, it's showing $175,000 a year as a straight line item each year. Because of the fact that it's off the line, just an explanation as how that's working. So anybody that's looking at it, because of course we've heard that the golf course is more than paying for itself. We have this $175,000 item that goes on, and before I get hit with a whole bunch of questions about golf course and $175,000 that are really counted, I just wanted to, Administrator Showman could just explain the revenue side of that, so it shows that the golf course is indeed profitable.
Sure, I can try to answer that. So, on the, there's a summary page that's looks like a spreadsheet. I'm not sure what number it is in your packet, but it has funding sources and project summaries. And the funding sources, in 2021, there's a line item from the golf course for $175,000. So in other words, there's $175,000 coming in revenue from the golf course. And then in project summaries, there's a project for $175,000 coming out of the golf course. So it's a money in, money out. So we've tried to transform this from a sales tax only plan into a true capital improvement plan. This is one of those cases, exactly like you're saying. The golf course is creating enough revenue that it can help fund capital projects, 175 in, and then expends it 175 out.
It's on page 7 for our, when we were looking at it, Josh, for everybody's sake, it's page 7.
Okay, it sounds like it's on page 7. That spreadsheet is on page 7. And you'll notice the first grayed out area is called funding sources. That area, that's where it says 175,000 from the golf course. That's a revenue. And then the next grayed out area is project summaries. Golf course, 175,000, that's the expense area. So revenue in, expense out.
Thank you. The other point I wanted to bring up was if you look at, and I'll list both, if you're using the counter that's in the PDF, it starts at page 13 and goes through page 30. If you're looking at the pages, or the numbers at the bottom of the page, it's page 10 through 27. I'm bringing this up specifically to show everything that's funded by sales tax, because I know that there are a number of people, municipalities who are saying, gee, you know, you've got all that extra money, what are you doing with it? We like some for our roads or whatever, and this is just to show. So I would ask that, you know, our good friends at the Daily News, Washington County Insider would look at those pages. Again, if you're looking at the number of the page 10 through 27, if you're looking at the PDF numbers, it's 13 through 30, to list. I mean, you're going through a lot of different things, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars with the property tax. This is what we do with it, and it would be great to see that reflected in their reporting, that they would say, hey, look, you know, you're looking to get money from the county, but the county is spending money on needed items. These are the things that we fund with the sales tax. It's right here, so I think that with a little bit of investigative reporting by pulling off the packet that we get right off of our internet, which is clearly, you know, available to everyone, that they'd be able to see exactly how we're planning over the next 5 years to spend that sales tax money. So it's available to everybody, and if they would put it out there, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Basil.
Thank you, sir. As chairman of the public safety, I want to just highlight in the capital improvement plan that the sheriff's department will be upgrading their radio system. They'll be starting probably sometime in the middle. They've already started the process, and it's going to be an upgrade of all the radio systems for all the municipalities, the fire departments, everyone, and the sales tax will be paying for all the upgrades, for all the radios, for all the departments in Washington County. So if you take like Bowmanville, you take like Allenton, they've been cost prohibitive for them to upgrade all the radios. This year we will be sharing the sales tax with all the municipalities to get the radios upgraded to be handle what's going to be coming down in the next couple of years. So I just want to make everybody aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Merton.
One other item, page 7 of 89. At the bottom, there's an asterisk, which says the sales tax revenue in excess of the total estimated will be designated for the revolving loan fund until the obligation is fully met. does that mean that after there's a blank in 2023, this does not apply?
That's correct. After 2023, this does not apply.
Correct, thank you.
Okay, seeing no more discussion, we'll vote on this electronically. Motion passes unanimously, 23-0. 2019 Resolution 64, General Fund Transfer and Jurisdictional Transfer of County Trunk Highway Y in the Village of Germantown. This will be a 2/3 vote as it's a general fund transfer. Supervisor McCune, Supervisor Bullowa. Supervisor Schleif.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask why we're doing this?
Sure.
$1,000 out of work for meetings.
The specific reason that this road was identified, although there were multiple roads in the sewer pack, long-term plan for jurisdictional transfers in Germantown specifically, the reason that this particular section of Goldendale Road is being transferred has everything to do with the development that they're seeing along Goldendale and Holy Hill Road. Transferring this stretch of road all the way down to Freistadt particularly gives them the ability to have local control over all of the access points on both sides, as well as the utilities that inevitably will go under that road and to some extent already have gone under that road. You'll notice as part of this package that there's some project work that will be done on Freistadt and Goldendale Road. That's an important upgrade for that intersection. For those of you who haven't driven down there, it's a very tight intersection with residential properties and a church, so improvements there are important. And then also Goldendale Road and Holy Hill Road, there will be improvements that are also happening at that intersection, and probably various phases that I would anticipate of improvements at that intersection. So all of those things, we anticipate traffic counts will skyrocket in this area over the course of the next decade. They already have the Briggs and Stratton project. And if you notice, the Briggs project, which was the Catalyst project, multiplied. I think there's now 7 buildings or 8, something like that. It went from 1 building to 8 buildings in less than 18 months. And buildings, if you haven't driven down there, these are 250,000 square foot facilities that are popping up. It's not just, 3,000 square foot homes. They're large buildings going in. So the impetus largely relates to the vast amount of development and local control of that roadway for the village of Germantown.
Did Germantown request it?
It was originally in the long-term sewer pack plan. That's where it came from. We've had an ongoing dialogue with Germantown about both of those intersections and how to handle them moving forward. And there's actually other roadways that we're in conversation with them on as well. So I would anticipate this will not be the last time we come to you doing a jurisdictional transfer with the village of Germantown. It's just the first because of its location and the rapid development in that area.
Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on this electronically. Motion passes 23-0. G, 2019 ordinance 17, speed zones on county trunk highways. Motion, Supervisor Bullowa, second Supervisor Sarsi. Any discussion? Seeing, sure you're not clicked in, Jeff, are you? Seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on this electronically. Motion passes 23-0. 2019 Resolution 65, transfer from the general fund to create a revolving loan funds for brownfields and site redevelopment program environmental assessments. This will also be a 2/3 majority vote. Supervisor Mahalik, Supervisor Basil. We have a presentation.
Actually, just want you to expand it and play.
Yes.
I can click out of this, right?
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
On Monday of this week, we had a press conference at E.H. Wolf, and this is a video that I'll synopsize what happened at that press conference.
The SRP success is years in the making. In 2013, Washington County formed a coalition with the city of Hartford, the city of West Bend, village of Jackson, village of Richfield, and village of Slinger to apply for an EPA Brownfield Coalition Assessment Grant for hazardous substance and petroleum brownfields. In total, the SRP has redeveloped 32 brownfield acres, constructed 262 new housing units, and invested over $43 million in new construction.
The downtown of the city is very similar to the core of an apple. If you let the core rot, the rest of the apple is soon to follow. So these brownfield grants, these cleanup opportunities, very often in our downtown areas really help not only preserve the core of an apple, but the city as a whole.
If you want to join us in the beautiful city of Hartford and our downtown, it is what we call the north bookend of the TIF district that was set up with the south bookend being our new cobblestone hotel, which is phenomenal, and then you have brownfield sitting in the north part. And it was this organization that we put together for all of the brownfield cleanup that allowed us to attract a developer and build these wonderful apartments right now.
We looked at the Slinger manufacturing site to determine whether or not that was feasible. It definitely would not have been feasible if it wasn't for programs like the Brownfield Grant Program and many others. But because of that, we are here today. We invested $6.2 million in a new office and a warehouse facility, and really gave the village of Slinger a really good complex to look at compared to what was here.
We have a strong respect for the balance between economic growth and vitality, and our rich heritage, vibrant economy, and attractive communities. The need for this balance is underscored at a recent meeting of the Cedar Creek farmers. When surveyed about the greatest resource concerns in Washington County in the coming years, loss of farmland to land development was their #1 concern. As an added benefit, the process good for the livelihoods of the communities, and it actually keeps more land available for agriculture, for farmland, and for farmland preservation.
Hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to read through their packet materials and the multitude of accolades for projects throughout Washington County. This is a phenomenal program that's to date been funded exclusively by the federal government, EPA Region 5. Just so you're aware, you saw in the video there a number of individuals come up and speak. Craig Sedonico speaking on behalf of American Construction Services. That project is the downtown hotel here at the old Gale property, for those of you who are familiar with that. Craig Wolf, obviously, from E.H. Wolf, which is really basically downtown Slinger. And then we had a multitude of local government leaders that joined us from across the county, both rural and urban. Obviously, you saw Mayor Mahalik and interim mayor from the city of West Bend, Steve Lugister, was with us. And then we had representatives from towns as well, from the town of Hartford, the town of West Bend, you saw from the town of Jackson, Ray Heike, Village of Slinger, I'm not gonna name everybody, sorry. But at any rate, we had, I think, 9 or 10 different local governments who were with us there, standing side by side. And so we got a picture that we will be sending to US EPA Region 5. The beauty of the resolution that you're considering tonight, excuse me, is that the Washington County would be establishing its own program that would be running parallel to the federal program. So for many, many years now, as was indicated in the video, the county has had federal dollars, $600,000 in federal dollars that have we've gotten a few times. Now we've applied for another federal program. That'll be a $600,000 grant, as well as hopefully $1 million revolving loan fund. What you're approving tonight will be above and beyond that, another $600,000 grant that's county money that will need ultimately to be approved by the executive committee before it's spent. And then beyond that, $1 million revolving loan fund. So there will be, at that point, 2 separate brownfield revolving loan funds. We hope both of those will be administered by EWC. So at this time, if there's any questions or comments, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Supervisor Merton.
I'm just trying to get my head around this whole thing. So one that we've done in the past has been the E.H. Wolf one. That's complete, correct?
E.H. Wolf is one of, I think, 36 projects. Is that the right number? It's one of many projects that we've done. The money that E.H. Wolf got was federal US EPA money.
Is that different from this?
It's different insofar as that was federal money. What you're approving tonight would be county money.
So why are there 2 different figures? One is for an assessment and the other is for doing the work? I'm just trying to understand it all.
Sure, that's a great question. So there's two separate programs that we're applying for. One is assessment, so the $600,000 grant that we would do pays for things like phase 1 and phase 2 environmental analysis. So, for example, before the Gale project could even begin, they had to hire engineering firms to go out there and study what the environmental impact has been out there from having Gale out on that property for years and years. So that's what's used for the $600,000 grant. And that's managed by the Site Redevelopment Committee, which is made up of all the local government partners. Chairman Heike from the town of Jackson is one of those partners. He chairs the Site Redevelopment Committee. So that's the $600,000. The $1 million grant would actually be utilized to help implement projects, and it would be a revolving loan fund. So it's a loan to community, or to businesses, excuse me, to help them make such projects work. So if you get a project where you have to do a lot of remediation, and without having a real low interest loan to make that project work, the project probably doesn't happen. That would be the intent of the revolving loan fund. Now, all the specifics of what that revolving loan fund is, how it works, how it's administered, that would be controlled by, that would be in an agreement with EWC, and it would be modeled after a similar program that we have applied for through the US EPA. So we're hoping that they'll also give us a revolving loan fund, and the 2 will replicate one another. One would be federal money, another would be county money. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. So people will apply for this. We right now don't have the applicants that have applied to us for this until we've approved the resolution, I'm assuming.
That's generally correct. So the revolving loan fund, we have no applicants at all at this time because there is no such program at this time. We have the grant program, we have actually demonstrated that there's a lot of need and desire to utilize the program insofar as we've gone through 2 full cycles of almost $1.2 million of the grant on the federal side. We've actually now applied for another $600,000, so take us up to $1.8 million. The county money would then take us up to $2.1 million, and they'd have slightly different rules, but there's definitely a need there and obviously there's a lot of other projects similar to the Rincon project in Hartford or the Gale project in downtown West Bend, there's several more opportunities throughout the county. And for every project that we're able to do on a brownfield site like Rincon or Gale, that's hopefully one less project where we have to tear up a cornfield.
That's it.
Supervisor Krebs.
Josh, could you expand on how the federal grant money will, work or dance with the local money? Will applicants kind of be going for both pots of money or one or the other? Can I explain how those relate to each other?
Yes, that's a great question. So, one of the things you'll notice in the resolution is that we're setting it up in such a way that they will be clearly identified as two separate programs, and the reason for that is we don't want the US EPA to think that our money is a match for their money. There's a 20% match requirement that's as part of the existing grants that we have and the new ones that the new grant program we applied for. We don't want to use that money to match. We actually want to have the municipalities work within themselves to match. So this will be independent altogether. Both programs, both grant programs, now I'm not talking about the revolving loan fund programs at the moment, but both grant programs will be administered by the Site Redevelopment Committee. Okay, so basically, you're letting the local governments have local control over their local control, if that makes any sense. So any community that sits on this committee, which the county, by the way, has a representative on it as well, they will have input as to which projects are approved and which projects are not approved. In the case of the county money that you're approving tonight, once that committee makes the approval, it then goes to the county's executive committee as a final approval to cut the check. Because we didn't feel comfortable, the executive committee didn't feel comfortable bringing a proposal to the board where there was a blank $600,000 check that subcommittee could basically dole out. So that will have to come back through the process. The other money, the federal money, already today, once that committee's made the approval, it goes out, it happens. On the revolving loan fund side, certainly the Site Redevelopment Committee will be part of that process, but ultimately, the vision is that EDWC and the revolving loan fund committee will handle that procedure, particularly on the county revolving loan fund. Does that differentiate enough? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Second question. By us, if this passes, if you set this up, is this gonna help or be neutral or hinder our chances of future federal money related towards these projects?
Our intent is that it will help. The intent of the press conference was to get a picture of all these town chairmen standing next to mayors that don't always get along with each other, but saying that in this case that we're all in agreement, this is a great program. Yeah, like blood brothers. In this particular case, we're hoping to share that image with US EPA and say, look, we're this serious about this program that we're going to double down on it. So we're hopeful that that's what happens. Now, we've gotten this grant twice. It's a very competitive grant. So we already feel like, we're hopeful that we get it, but we already feel like we need to cross our fingers to get it again. And the $1 million revolving loan fund, we've applied for that once and not gotten it. So I don't feel 100% confident we're going to get either one of those. This way, regardless of whether the feds deliver or not, we're going to have a program. We're just hoping we can double our money.
Okay. Last question. The coalition partners that the resolution references that there will be doing 20% match. That 20%, or the coalition partner, that can be either a private company or a local municipality, correct? So whether it's from, let's say, Wolf, or it could come from Village of Slinger, like it's beneath the county. Doesn't matter who's paying that 20%.
It's generally so early in the process, and it's sunk cost that generally speaking, it comes from the municipality. And just to put that number in context, generally speaking, we're talking about $40,000, so it's 20% of $40,000. So it's not huge numbers that we're describing here. But generally speaking, it's the municipality we're asking it for. The reason that that's in the resolution is because this became a problem. It was discussed at length at executive committee, so I won't go into a ton of detail on it. But one municipality balked at having to kick in 20%, and all the other municipalities were in agreement. So we ended up submitting our application stating that this was something that was under discussion. For the county program, there's no discussion. It's a 20% match. Now, can the municipality get that money back at some point through a TIF district or something else? Probably. I know enough financial experts in local government to say the answer to that is yes. But on the front end, there needs to be skin in the game, and it likely is going to come from the local government.
Thank you.
How do we try to buzz in here? You get your little, break
I'm on the right.
Yeah, it's not popping up, shouldn't it have a little light around?
I got you. You're on.
There you go. Yes, so Josh has just been so elegant and kind of professional in not saying who that community was. So it was an embarrassment. And an executive, I don't think there was one person as part of the executive committee that wasn't embarrassed for that municipality. It was West Bend. And it's a joke to be part of this. And, you know, you had that picture up there, you had the former mayor up here. Mr. Sedano has done a great job when he was mayor. And what has happened for the reinvestment within our county, the millions of dollars of improvements in Hartford for that project, it's incredible what's been done. And you asked Mr. Heike. So it's really an embarrassment that we had a gun to our head at the end, the day before where we were applying in, and someone said no. And it had to do with that 20%. And when it comes down to it, as you said, 40,000, you know, it's not a rocket scientist, 20% of that, right? It's a small figure. And we wanted skin in the game. And everybody on executive, you know, if I'm speaking out of turn, correct me, but we all agreed. It's paramount that we have buy-in from the communities, because this is an overall, we're all on the same team here to help the county. And to this day, I truly don't believe the council of West Bend really realized. I don't think they were given all the information. Because if they were given all the information, I can't believe that'd be a council decision, that they wouldn't support that. I think that was an individual decision, and it's an embarrassment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on this electronically. Motion passes 24-0. 2019 Resolution 66, authorization to apply to the Director of State Courts for a Fifth Circuit Court Branch in Washington County. Motion by Supervisor Basil, second by Supervisor Bossert.
Mr. Chairman. If I might, you've received an email, you've received on your desks a letter from the Director of State Courts, basically explaining how the allocation process is intended to work moving forward. So you may be sitting here asking yourself, isn't this kind of a moot point? Why are we going through this exercise? The reason we're going through this exercise at this point is to make sure that the Director of State Courts knows that Washington County stands ready and willing to add a fifth branch, assuming that's what you're ready and willing to do. And in the event that any one of those counties drop off the list, we're here ready to be the next one. Now, that doesn't make us the next one. There's probably other counties who are ready and willing as well. But we wanted to make sure that before this board left, you made that statement as we've discussed. This has been discussed in the past. So it also, to that point, that also explains why the resolution is pretty darn vague. Some have asked me why we're writing a blank check. You're not writing a blank check. The county board would have to approve a general fund transfer at some point, otherwise there's no way to get the money. But it does put us in a position to go back to the director of state courts and our regional director and tell them, we're ready and willing whenever you are. That's the intent of what we're doing today.
Yeah, it's interesting, this bill was signed 5 days ago. So, Supervisor Dice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a former clerk of circuit court for Washington County, I am well aware of the fact of, at some point in time, that we will need a fifth branch of court. But it's also my understanding that the Director of State Court's office still determines need based on a weighted case study. And it's also my understanding that of 72 counties, we are like number 41 in need. So I'm not sure that this is going to happen anytime soon. However, with Josh's explanation now, because that was initially going to be my question, why are we pursuing this based on the Director of State Court's letter, I don't have a problem letting them know that we're interested in pursuing this if it happens. But the likelihood of that happening anytime soon, I think, is pretty low. But it might make our judges happy if we send a letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Bullock. Oh, I'm sorry, did you want to?
No.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do support the fifth court. I just had the objection of not having any sort of dollar amount going along with this. I think we at least need to have
Okay.
a ballpark figure where this would come out. And maybe we have something from the past, but I think it probably would need to be updated because it's probably a long time ago. So, I think that'd be really helpful for a future vote.
Thank you.
And the only thing I would say to that is we have no idea. I mean, the AV equipment alone is probably $150,000, give or take. And I mean, give or take by like 25 grand. It's not a good number to use. But I would anticipate this is somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million project. If you've ever been in this space for the fifth courtroom, you're literally talking about concrete walls and drywall in some spots. This is a barren room that was like left in case we ever one day possibly might get another court. So there's a lot of money that's going to go into that facility if and when we actually do it. And I wouldn't be comfortable shooting in the dark, but you can expect it's a big number with a lot of zeros behind it.
Supervisor Mahalik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to comment on what Supervisor Dice has mentioned, as number 41 I can understand, and I'm hoping that you will support it. I'm very interested in this because I've talked to Administrator Shulman, obviously Chairman Creefall, as regards to the growth in Washington County. We're one of the fastest growing counties in the state. So we're going to need this. We're going to accelerate into this. And even with the city of Hartford, which is in the top 5 fastest growing municipalities by percentage in the state. It happens that we are very close to Milwaukee. A lot of the crime comes out of Milwaukee, and we're going to have to address that. We have, as was demonstrated at the beginning of this meeting, some phenomenal law enforcement folks. I'm sure on the municipal level, I can speak personally for Hartford, who does a great job. We've seen now that Washington County is doing a great job with that, but that doesn't mean that we're going to stop crime. It means that we're going to apprehend those, using the term, evildoers that have been in Washington County and our municipalities, which means we're going to need more courts, more facilities, more of the individuals who can help us out. Those resources, if they are available, we should do it. So I'm very much in support of this, but I wanted to ask, again, Administrator Shulman and Chairman Creefall, would it be helpful for any of us to also write a letter specifically or an email to the Director of State Courts in support of this, and maybe give them or give a reason or two beyond what we're doing here, just to add to the fact that, you know, there are a number of elected officials that are certainly supporting this, so we can come at it with even more vigor. Is that something you would recommend?
I would say that would be appropriate. I spoke with Judge Porles today, who said that they are starting to get overwhelmed as judges. He's got to be in the office by about 6:45 every day to keep up the paperwork. Our judges are relatively efficient when they're working, but they are, their caseloads are starting to build, especially with the number of drug cases we get in Washington County. So we have a drug court, but that drug court actually takes one of our judges into that drug court and not hearing other cases that they could be hearing. So I'm supportive of this also. Supervisor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to remind everybody that something that they all know, one way or the other, that is that it's one of the prime responsibilities of government at all levels to provide for the security of our citizens. This is, of course, a law and order issue here we're speaking of. Unfortunately, law and order is expensive, but it's one of our prime responsibilities. So I would hope we could get a unanimous vote here in favor of doing this. It's probably going to be a while before we get another judge, but we're going to need one, and there's nothing we can do about it. We just got to have it. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, we can vote on this electronically. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brett.
I would point out that since this resolution was passed by Public Safety Committee, the Assembly bill has now been signed by the governor, so the resolution references Assembly Bill 470. It's now 2019 Act 184. I guess I would ask Supervisor Basel if you would accept a friendly amendment to change the references to Assembly Bill 470 to 2019 Act 184 on lines 12 and lines 20. Change the language on line 20 to simply read, whereas 2019 Act 184 also creates conditions.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. We don't need to do an amendment. This is friendly. Okay, we'll be ready to vote on that electronically. Motion passes unanimously. (2019) 2019 ordinance 18 sewers and sewage disposal, chapter 190. Basically, clean up the language. I need a motion. Supervisor Gonring, Supervisor Schleif. Supervisor Krebs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for Brad would be RPDF page 17. It would be the violations and penalties section of this. We're increasing the fines substantially. I'm wondering, in a lot of other areas, we're changing it to references of state law or code statutes. Instead of putting actual dollar amounts in there, is there anything on the state level that dictates fines and penalties that we can reference, so we're not having to just make up our own fines?
No, it's really a matter of discretion in those areas. But as you point that out, just to clarify too, this particular revision to Chapter 190, this was beyond the scope of the original recodification completed last year. It was a project that the Parks Department had ongoing, had been working on for quite some time, and there were essentially, I believe, 5 areas really that were focused in on in this particular change, Chapter 190, and that was one of them. They felt that the penalties needed to be updated, and they felt that what they were doing here gave them some more latitude to assess penalties that were appropriate to various circumstances and situations. So the other change is, if you are, for the benefit of the board as well, There were changes to section 11 regarding appeals, section 8 regarding administration, and what happened there was we, as you indicated, Supervisor Kress, we took the statute, looked at it, found that in the current version of the ordinance we had, there were some certain powers and duties that didn't quite line up with what is in these statutes. So we made references to statutes and enumerating these powers, which can change and we were inconsistent with. And then there was the elimination of the sanitary variance requirement for new construction holding tanks. That was the other change. So those are the main things, but yes, the penalties, as you indicate, was something where we had some discretion, and that's what Jamie and her team was looking to do themselves.
What kind of a fine is that? Is this something that would be assessed against the person or the property?
It'd be against the owner is how I would read it, I suppose. I have to look at the record.
For collection purposes, it would be, we'd be going after the individual and we would not be able to attach to the property tax bill.
I think that'd be my reading of it.
Thank you.
Supervisor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Brad already answered this. I just wanted to clarify. All of this language that's in this that's been deleted, I'm assuming is it's deleted in favor of the state language that replaces it. And so we're just taking away things in this ordinance that were in fact responsibility individually set forth in these various sections, and just on a blanket replacement saying, you know, we're essentially using state language law to replace all this stuff, even though it's not in here, because there's a huge amount deleted.
That's exactly correct. There were places where, and there were sections, for example, I believe in 190-8, it was a huge chunks of text deleted, and those were duties and powers and so forth that the department had been granted over the course of time. And when we did the research, and Jamie had asked my team, my attorneys, to take a look at line that ordinance up with state law, we found inconsistencies there, things that we were doing that we really shouldn't be doing. And I'm not saying things that were illegal, I'm saying things were beyond really what we were required to do under the law, so we pared back and said, look, these are your duties, responsibilities, these are the things you should be doing. And we wanted to make sure that we referenced the statute rather than enumerating those powers so that should the statute change in the future, we can keep up with that without having to come back and amend ordinances. One of the substantive changes you would see, also where we deleted a lot of text, was in section 11 regarding appeals. The process that we had in there was very cumbersome, and I questioned, quite frankly, how appropriate it was. It had gone back decades, where we were having meetings with municipalities to discuss certain aspects. I was concerned about violations of open meetings laws and reading some of this stuff. And what we did was we decided to opt out of Chapter 68 of the statutes and create our own appeals procedure. Chapter 68 is typically the process that a municipality, including a county, would use if a person feels they're aggrieved. Very cumbersome, lots of steps to it. And by law, we're allowed to opt out, create our own process. We took a look at that. We did that much like we did a while back with, for example, the employee grievance policy or the ethics body of law, where we tried to streamline those things and eliminate certain steps and so on. Due process has been preserved, I guarantee you that, but we wanted to make the process easier to understand. The rules are clearer. The rules of evidence, for example, in courtrooms don't apply. There was a question about that, and we left it as it was. So we really wanted to clean that up so people picking this body of law up going forward can read this and understand it and apply it clearly. So that, the long answer to your question, but we really were looking to make this a much cleaner chapter.
Thank you.
Supervisor Krebs, you have more questions?
Yeah.
No, hold on, let me click in. Okay.
Oh.
If you make sure you put the mic a little bit closer, it's really hard to hear you.
As we're going through and amending this, reading through it, there's references to previous ordinances. Example, I'm on 90-14, and it talks about amendments by ordinances back from 2000, 2019. Do we need those references to remain in this if we're going through and cleaning up the entire
those references in there for essentially legislative history, should anybody pick this up and want to trace it back. When we send this off to general, we work with them to clean up certain things like that, determine what we really need to leave in terms of that sort of thing. And this will be sent off to them for them to then put into our code in April, we'll be doing that. So we have those things in historically so that if you pick up this version of the law, you can trace back and find out when it was amended and so on. So we do have those throughout the code.
So wherever there's gonna be, wherever we're striking out or replacing things currently, in the future, there will be references to this ordinance that we're debating here tonight, ordinance 18.
Generally, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more discussion, we'll vote on this electronically. Motion passes unanimously, 24-0. At this point, I'm going to entertain a motion to convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 119.85 sub 1 sub D for the purpose of considering crime prevention and detection, specifically to review the county's cybersecurity plan. Supervisor Mahalik, Supervisor Hartwig. We vote on this electronically, correct? I vote on this electronically.
We're missing one.
We're missing? Tuesday. Oh, thank you.
Supervisor Brandt. Supervisor Brandt.
Supervisor Brandt, did you? Yes or no? You want to go into closed? Hit present and then.
He's present.
Okay, we are in closed session.